Europe's wild stream, the Elbe. From its source in the giant mountains to the Wadden Sea, 1,100 kilometers of nature. A river with many faces marked by constant change. Saxon Switzerland, a wilderness which has become extraordinary. The largest alluvial forest in Central Europe, as unique as its animal life. Across the Czech Republic and Germany, the Elbe flows through landscapes with an abundance of life, a variety hardly enjoyed by any other European river. The giant mountains, the highest in the Czech Republic. The Elbe springs from here among the smooth, glacier-formed peaks. A bare concrete ring, almost 1,400 meters above sea level, is the official source of the Labe, as the Elbe is called in Czech. Ancient moors developed on the nearby land. These are the true source of the river. A mountain stream quickly developed, which after half a kilometre plummets down 40 metres as an impressive waterfall. Early autumn, red deer rutting season is reaching its climax. The females are still milling around with this year's young when the dominant male gathers his harem around him. Some of the younger stags are already testing out their strength. The competitors don't dare to approach the alpha male and his harem. He can give all his attention to the females. Only when the females are ready can he breed with them. The stag guards and protects the group for a good 2 weeks, until the rutting season is over. For the stag, it's the most stressful time of the year. Since 1963, large parts of the giant mountains have been national park areas and the realm of a capricious mountain spirit called Rubezahl. He rules over the weather, so they say, and conjures up storms and mist, sometimes in a matter of minutes. The rising Elbe drastically varies its character in the mountains, bubbling along in dry periods, then thundering down to the valley after rainfall. Even in high summer, the water never gets warmer than 8 degrees in the mountain stream. Good conditions for fish, who like it cool and oxygen-rich. Like the European bullhead, for example, so called due to its rather fierce appearance. In spawning season, the male builds a pit in the stony riverbed. The bullhead male tries to guide any females who swim through his territory to the pit. In successful cases, the female will lay her eggs there. The male inseminates the eggs and will watch over them for 4 to 6 weeks until the baby bullheads are hatched. A caring father. He guards his offspring and constantly fans the eggs with oxygen-rich water. At the foot of the giant mountains, deciduous trees line the Elbe's banks. In the past few centuries, beech trees and sycamores were extensively felled here. By today, however, the mountain woods have been reforested. The best conditions for a colourful autumn. The colour display doesn't last long. Winter arrives quickly in the giant mountains. For 5 to 6 months of the year, the mountains lie buried under a blanket of snow. The Elbe is a lifeline for many animals, as it doesn't completely freeze. Whoever spends winter here has to find something to eat. A grey heron ventures out on the ice. The fish are floating peacefully in the cold water under the ice ledge. They also attract the otter. In winter, these agile hunters are often out and about in daytime. The otter has to enter the water to get to the fish. The cold doesn't bother him. His extremely thick fur insulates and also prevents any drop of ice water getting to the skin. Since 1934, the common otter has been classed as extinct in the giant mountains. They've been driven out by hunting, but especially by the destruction of their habitat through river control and pollution. Thanks to conscious protection efforts, the otters have been returning since the 1990s. Snow and mist cloak the giant mountains until into April. The first spring sun shines onto snowfields at the tree line, a stage for the performances of the black grouse. They enter the arena like medieval knights. Rivals are presented with a show of splayed wings, fluffed up tail feathers, and bright red flecks above the eyes. The same display areas will often be used for decades. Here the birds fight it out for the pecking order. The females watch the spectacle from the trees. When they're watching, the male's agitation has no limits. As if by a secret sign, the courtship battles are over at 8 AM. Until dawn the next day. By the time the black grouse are mating, the snow is starting to melt. Spring is not far away. The Elbe is tamed for the first time a few kilometres from its source. The dam at Spindlerov Mlyn was established at the beginning of the 20th century to control the vast spring floodwater. "650 metres in altitude have already been overcome by the river. On leaving the giant mountains, it will be 1,000. From here, it flows into the Bohemian Basin. This rolling hill country is famous for its castles and palaces. Kuks, a classy 18th century health resort. Kunyatitska Hora Castle sits enthroned on an ancient volcano which towers imposingly over the Elbe. 60 kilometres from source, at Dvor Kralove, the Elbe is met by a second dam installation. Further upstream, this has resulted in peaceful coves and smaller river branches. An ideal hunting ground for otters. The development of the otter's habitat has been a success story for Czech nature conservation. After the fall of the Iron Curtain in 1990, the water quality of the Elbe improved. Fish stocks recovered. Good living conditions and strict protection measures for the last otters have meant that the animals can be found again all along the river. They're inquisitive, but also cautious and shy. Fish farmers and anglers don't like the competition that the otters represent. Otters don't have an isolating layer of fat. Their extremely thick fur protects the animals from cold, but demands considerable attention. 10% of the day is devoted to grooming. Afterwards, the hunger can be sated. Otters feed mostly on small and weakened animals, and thus help to maintain a healthy stock of fish. They bring their prey to the riverbank. That way it can't escape again. Otters need around 1 kilo of food per day, mostly fish, but often also crayfish and amphibians. Below the dam at Dvor Kralove, the impact of humans is highly noticeable. In the Middle Ages, the Elbe was used here as a transport route for wood until it reached the first big city, Hradec Králové, one of the richest Bohemian cities in medieval times. On the southern edge of the city, a former military training area outlived the fall of the Iron Curtain as a nature reserve, where an unusual native of the Elbe region has found sanctuary. the fire-bellied toad. Its bell-like call gives it away. If it can't disappear quickly enough, the fire-bellied toad has a trick up its sleeve. When danger looms, they turn their legs upwards and show part of their bright underbelly. The warning colours are meant to discourage enemies like the white stork from attacking. This time, it worked. Man-made environments are important for endangered species. At the fish ponds of Pardubice lives the harvest mouse, one of the smallest rodents in Europe. A female builds her ball nest in the undergrowth. The mother-to-be handles the long leaves expertly. The harvest mouse works away in the future nursery for 2 to 8 days. She has to get on with it, as she's only pregnant for around 3 weeks. She decorates the nest interior with stalks, which she chews up thoroughly. Harvest mice are scarce in the Czech Elbe. They lack ponds with natural banks and enough reeds, which the great crested grebe also likes. This couple has new offspring. They're fed with tiny grubs and even allow themselves to be lured into the water by them. Apart from grubs, the parents also feed them feathers, which can make up almost half their diet. Apparently, they're supposed to protect the chicks' stomachs from fish bones. Using Mum and Dad as a raft is pretty nifty. You can travel safely across the lake, when you've found the entrance, that is. Meanwhile, the baby mice have been born in the reeds. They lie well hidden in the ball nest, with no idea of the dangers lurking outside. The fox appears to have noticed something. The mother begins a frantic rescue operation. Harvest mice always build several nests. In emergencies, they take their offspring to another hiding place. Every single baby mouse will be transported across the swaying escape route. Right in the nick of time, Mother Mouse collects the last baby. This time, the hunter leaves empty-handed. The mice are safe in their new den, while the fox has to seek his fortunes elsewhere. Over the next 50 kilometres, the Elbe is accompanied by fields and meadows. Despite intensive utilisation, there are still areas here which are close to nature. Rare European ground squirrels have their habitat here, which is full of tasty herbs and flowers. The meadow is actually a small airfield, which is very seldom used. No more than 3,600 squirrels live in the Czech Republic, and their numbers are still in decline. The animals thrive in colonies. One always stands guard. A warning whistle, and they make themselves scarce. As soon as the danger has passed, it's back to the feasting. Squirrels don't collect any winter stocks. By the start of September, they've put on enough fat to get through their 7-month hibernation. Eating and sleeping. What a life. "80 kilometres further downstream, the Elbe reaches the city of Melnik. Here the river Vltava flows into the Elbe. It's the Czech Republic's longest river and is also wider than the Elbe at this point. The slopes along the Elbe are fertile wine and fruit growing territory. An environment which many animals must feel is paradise. Dormice, for example. They sleep the days away in their tree holes. When night falls over the Elbe, the little dormice wake up. They're active for a good 4 months a year. Night after night, they're out in search of food. Dormice can really pack it in. Scoffing a whole apple in a single night is no problem for them. Again and again they take short breaks. Only time-lapse can reveal how effectively the fruit is devoured. Dormice need a varied landscape with different types of tree. They're still common by the Elbe around Melnik, but becoming more scarce elsewhere. After Melnik, the Elbe leaves the flat plains of the Bohemian Basin. The river approaches the central Bohemian uplands. Huge lava flows formed the land around 50 million years ago. At the Czech Gate, the Elbe finds its way through the hard rock. There are 24 dams on the Czech Elbe. Another one is planned just before the border with Germany at Děčín. Environmentalists are warning of the consequences. They fear that even more river control would lead to species extinction on the Elbe. Schreckenstein Castle at Ústí nad Labem towers above the last dam. The old ruins have long been a favourite subject for many artists. The same is true of Saxon Switzerland, on the other side of the border. The Elbe has reached Germany. Around 100 million years ago, this area was covered by a giant sea. The fossilised sand deposits were later cut through by the Elbe, flanked by typical table mountains. Mouflon are living on the slopes. The animals have been naturalised here since the 1930s and can spread out well in the partially impassable terrain. They seldom come to the meadows. Most of the time, they're hidden in the forest. During mating season, the rams follow the herds of females. Time after time, the males fight bitterly for their place in the hierarchy. The competitors even have to fend off blows below the belt. Only the strongest of them may breed. An area of more than 700 square kilometres in Saxon Switzerland was declared a national park in 1990. Not only due to the unique landscape, but also to the animal life. Black storks breed in the rocks here. The offspring are almost fully fledged and waiting for the next meal. There's not much to do apart from grooming, so let's go for it. A bit of plucking won't help. The feathers are stuck. Oh well, no one's perfect. The black storks have picked out the most inaccessible corners between the rocks and the wild gorges. They share the extreme habitat with other rare birds, like peregrine falcons and pygmy owls. Water from numerous streams flows down the narrow valleys and into the Elbe. A few kilometres further on lies the capital of Saxony, Dresden. The jewels of the city mark its silhouette: the Frauenkirche, Semperoper and the Zwinger. At nightfall, the Florence of the Elbe exudes its very special charm, here, halfway between source and estuary. The Elbe has already come 500 kilometers. January in Saxony. Hartenfels Castle is in hibernation. History was made here. At Torgau on the banks of the Elbe, Soviet and American troops met on the 25th of April 1945 at the end of the Second World War. Today, a fox and a vixen meet on the icy meadows. It's mating season. Hunger drove her from her den. He follows her hoping to mate. The vixen can only be impregnated for 2 to 3 days a year. He mustn't miss this window. She keeps him at a distance and makes it very clear she's not ready yet. Shortly after Torgau, the UNESCO Biosphere Reserve Elbe River landscape begins. 400 kilometers of river from Saxony-Anhalt to Schleswig-Holstein. The flat ponds behind the dike are ideal waters for moor frogs. In spawning season, the males turn blue, attracting uninvited guests. A grey heron on the search for prey. Luckily, moor frogs are still common on the Elbe. The males have good chances as soon as the females show up a bit later, if they're not disturbed. The short-term water surfaces are also used by fairy shrimps. They hatch from eggs which can survive months of drought. Shrimps are back swimmers. Their 11 pairs of legs neatly stroke the water backwards, while simultaneously directing food particles to their mouths. One of the greatest treasures of the whole river lies here, at the Middle Elbe, Europe's largest alluvial forest, with its centrepiece, the Steckby-Löderitzer forest. Endless flood meadows with 3,800 hectares of ancient trees. No other European river can offer anything comparable. 1,000 plant species, 135 types of bird and 40 types of mammal, a unique diversity formed by the Elbe and her changing water levels. An environment almost tailor-made for the beaver. His tracks can be found all over the water's edge. At dusk, the large rodents leave their dens to search for food. A beaver has to gnaw away 200 metres of fresh branches a night to be satisfied, preferably from in the water, so that the animal is safe from enemies. Branches with fresh leaves are immediately carried off to a peaceful spot. Further downstream, north of Magdeburg, the Elbe crosses the so-called Altmark region. Large areas of the ancient cultivated land are so fertile that they brought the Hanseatic city of Tangermünde wealth and power in the 15th century. St. Stephen's Church, the castle and the old town remind the visitor of past splendour. The forests of the Altmark attract animals which don't normally appear here. American imports who have settled along the Elbe. Raccoons. The mother leaves the tree hole to look for food. She leaves her offspring behind. The alluvial forest is perfect for raccoons. They have food in abundance, and the old trees provide dens. In late spring, the young leave the safety of the lair for the first time. They're about 10 weeks old and use the unsupervised time for exploration round about the tree hole. The young ones are in their element in the forest. There's a lot to learn. Raccoons are good climbers and investigate everything they encounter. That can become a problem, threatening birds whose nests they plunder. The young raccoons will spend the rest of the day sleeping in their den. The first adventure was exciting enough. The Altmark attracts animals whose lives are closely linked to the Elbe. In the little village of Ruhstedt, more storks breed than anywhere else in Germany, more than 30 couples a year. The record is 44. The sociable, outgoing birds don't have far to go from the rooftop breeding sites to the wet meadows where they pick around for food. Everything from frogs and insects to mice and earthworms find their way to the beak. Breeding season is the hardest work for stork parents. Only very few of them manage to support 5 offspring for 2 months. Extreme high water helps them. They catch huge numbers of mice who've saved themselves from drowning on the meadows behind the dikes. The young form a circle in the nest. The parents regurgitate the food in the middle so that everyone can get a piece. Whoever's had enough food can practice the second most important thing for a young stork: flying. Soon they'll be ready for their first tours, assuming that they've built up their wing muscles. Storks have made the place famous. Since 1996, it's been known as European Stork Village. The people of Rustedt laid the foundations of this themselves. As early as the 1970s, they were starting to install the first artificial nests on their roofs. To the right, Brandenburg. To the left, Saxony-Anhalt. The Elbe is a border river, like here in the sparsely populated region of Wendland. Since the 80s, it's been intended as a final disposal site for nuclear waste. The yellow X represents the opposition of the population. Wendland has another side, however. Around the Elbe, and in the vast forests and peaceful forest lakes, there's still plenty of room for wildlife. Red deer. The herds take an early morning bath in one of the numerous ponds. It doesn't seem to bother the crane. Exactly why the bird stays put, apparently quite relaxed, only becomes clear after the inquisitive deer have disappeared. The crane chicks only hatched 2 days ago. The birds are mobile from birth and following their parents around after only 24 hours. In the first few weeks, the parents supply the chicks with insects, larvae, worms and snails. They don't feed them directly though. A few morsels are just laid down in front of them until they're able to search for food themselves. These little feather balls already weigh around 150 grams. It's hard to believe that in only 10 weeks, they'll be around 40 times as heavy. So that the chicks can survive the first perilous weeks, the family remains near the brooding island, unreachable by enemies like foxes and wild boars. After the Second World War, fewer than 500 crane couples were breeding in Germany. The Elbe was their most westerly area of expansion. From the mid-1970s, thanks to intensive nature conservation, the levels continued to rise. Today, more than 5,000 pairs are once again breeding in Germany. By now, the Elbe has flowed over 1,000 kilometers. It's reached the city of Hamburg. Germany's largest seaport changes the face of the river. Nevertheless, there's still plenty of room for nature. A peregrine falcon raises its young in the tower of St. James's Church. He's brought along a pigeon. The falcon took the prey in flight, right in the middle of the city. He came crashing down on the pigeon at over 200 kilometers an hour, proving his status as one of the world's fastest birds. The falcons have to provide for 4 chicks. After 3/4 of an hour, the pigeon has finally been fed to the offspring. Conditions in Hamburg are good for the birds of prey. The abundance of pigeons makes life easy for them in the Hanseatic city. This vixen also appreciates the city environment. People always leave things nearby the river, which she and her cubs can use. All along Hamburg harbour, everything revolves around trade and shipping. The Elbe is supposed to be deepened by at least another metre until the North Sea, so the increasingly bigger container vessels can reach the Hamburg port. Beyond Hamburg, the Elbe becomes a green river once again. A few kilometres further, the stream is accompanied by fertile marshland. Above all, it's a centre of attraction for migratory birds, being so close to the North Sea coast. Roe deer also feel at home in the marshes. In the mosaic of meadows, moorland and woods, they find food and shelter the whole year round. The cranes are only passing through. At nightfall, they gather at their traditional sleeping places. The herons and cranes have spent the night in a lake on the Elbe Marsh, safe from enemies. At sunrise, the birds move to some nearby harvested cornfields to stock up on fat reserves for their onward journeys to winter quarters in France and Spain. A few kilometres before the North Sea, the Elbe marshland is sparsely populated and ideal for resting birds from the north. Barnacle geese arrive in autumn from their Arctic breeding grounds to spend the winters in the Elbe pastureland around the village of Freiburg. In the spacious nature reserve, they also stock up on food for winter and their 4,000-kilometre journey back to the Arctic breeding area. As if on command, the flock takes off in the last of the evening light, heading for the Wadden Sea. "80,000 barnacle geese now rest by the lower Elbe every year. That's 1/5 of their world population. Barely 30 kilometers further is Cuxhaven. Here, the Elbe enters the North Sea. The river quietly disappears into the tides of the Wadden Sea, the third national park which the Elbe has crossed on her 1,100-kilometre long journey. Truly Europe's wild river.